Yeah, so I just want to talk to you about how you go about getting your music onto sort of major digital retailers if you've not done that before. And if you have done it before, maybe suggest a better alternative to what you're doing at the moment. So there's kind of two main options as to how you would go about it. And you would either really sign with a record company and let them do it for you, and that isn't really as simple, easy, or as cheap as it sounds. But I mean, if you can get it, definitely go ahead, see how it goes. Or you could do it yourself in the meantime with the help of a distribution company. So with regards to what distributors actually do, they do the boring side of the job for you. Ensure that your three sets of assets, so your audio, artwork, and data, ensure that it's all correct. And different stores, for instance iTunes and Spotify, they'll take different file types for each of your releases. So it's not to say that just because you've got your audio files and your artwork as like a WAV and a JPEG, it doesn't mean that every service right across the board is going to take it the same way. So distributors should know the correct specifications for each store and sort of package this for you and deliver it to services for you. After it's delivered, if they're doing the job properly, they should be making sure that it looks how it should do on stores, it's playing how it should on stores. I guess more importantly, they'll collect royalties due to you from the sale or stream of your music and pay it back to you. So with regards to how that actually works, we'll talk about that. So obviously EMU bands are a digital distribution company, but there's loads of them out there, so there's loads of different pricing models that they all operate with. Typically, there's a small annual fee that will be charged generally between £10 and £20 a year. If you stop paying the annual fee, your music will be just removed from stores. So it's something to think about, as well as the smaller sort of annual fee. Some distributors will take a cut of your royalties, and I've seen this really range between 5%, but to as high as maybe 25%. And some might take a larger annual payment, maybe £50 a year, in exchange for a smaller commission on your royalties. But often you don't get 100%. So the simple one-off fee per release is how we operate. So there's no recurring fees whatsoever. You pay as your one-off fee. And your music remains for sale on iTunes or on Spotify, etc. for as long as you wish it to be. You keep 100% of your rights, so you're totally in control. You're not signing your life away to us. And you keep 100% of your royalties, which we think we just think that's a much simpler, fairer way to operate. So with regards to how it works, so you've got your three assets that I spoke about earlier. So you've got your data, which is your sort of your release title and all the sort of text-based information about your release and your audio files and artwork. So you're sort of granting us a non-exclusive license to distribute your music. You're free to work with other companies at the same time, and you're also free to leave us at any time. So you're not basically tied under with like a heavy contract. So we take that in, we package it, like I said earlier, we package it, distribute it to stores, we sub-license this on your behalf. So it's on stores, it's on iTunes, people are buying it. If it's on Spotify, people are streaming it. It's generating a royalty, which is then reported back to us by stores. It comes into our system. We basically check it against the royalty reports, make sure that's all correct, and just pay 100% of that right back to you. It really is as simple as that. With regards to actually using our service, you just get started. It's super simple on our website, just emubands.com. There's a big green Get Started button. Click that, and then fill out this form. So it's just maybe 5-6 bits of information. When you've got an account, you'll be assigned a named account manager. With regards to the metadata, which I touched upon earlier, this is the sort of stuff that you should really be expecting to fill in for us to put out your release. So you've got your release title, and you've got the number of tracks. We need to know the number of tracks, obviously. That's a fundamental thing. Your release date, you can set a release date and a pre-order date if you want to do it for pre-order, but it's not compulsory. Your P year, which is basically the copyright and the sound recordings. So it's generally the year that your recordings were first released. And the C year is similar to that, except it represents the whole product. So P years for your songs, C years for the actual release as a whole. So, I mean, they're pretty important, but if we notice that there's maybe a discrepancy in that, we will be able to advise on what your P's and C years should actually be. Genre is important as well. Have a think about that. Make it easy as possible for people to find you that want to listen to your music on these services. So that's the sort of information that you're going to need for the release level, but obviously you've got your release level stuff and you've got your track level. So if your release is a one-track release, then that's going to be almost the exact same as the information for your songs. But if you've got a 10-track release, then all the information for each of your songs is going to be slightly different to the release level information. So things like the duration is important. You put that in, we need to make sure that the duration of the track matches with the audio file that you've sent us, because you get so many times people will say, oh, my track's 3 minutes, 30 seconds long, and they've sent us an audio file that's 5 minutes in length, and it's the wrong song. People send you the wrong song. That happens all the time. You don't want to have a situation where that's actually being sold to people and it's like a demo that you recorded in your bedroom. Mistakes happen, so it's important that you get all that correct. With regards to sort of everything else on this, the thing that I want to touch upon is ISRCs. So that's basically like a unique code that's used to track royalties and amongst other things like radio play as well. If you're getting involved in that, if you don't have them, we can assign them free of charge for you. I think that some other companies you incur a fee, but to be honest, if you're making music and recording music, you can get it through a company called PPL, and I would recommend that you sign up to PPL. So let's talk about your audio. So your audio should be a 16-bit WAV file, which is a pretty industry standard. You get that from most recording studios, or if you record stuff yourself, you should just be able to export it super easy. The reason that we ask for a 16-bit WAV is because it generally ensures that it's going to be, of a good sound quality. Different stores, again, they'll take different audio files. Some will take MP3s, some want the WAVs, some want FLAC files, and because it's coming into our system and being converted into those file types, if you're sending as an MP3, by the time it comes out the other end, it's sounding a little bit worse than it did when you sent us it. So if you send us a WAV file, that's going to ensure that that doesn't happen. Let's talk about your artwork. So artwork should be just a JPEG, 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. I guess if basic math would tell you that's a perfect square, it needs to be a perfect square. 300 dpi in RGB color mode. Things that are important to touch upon here is that it shouldn't contain any additional information or text. And this isn't me making up these rules. This is different digital services that we work with have guidelines on artwork. And it basically, if an artwork has, I guess, if you've got like an artist name and then just a bit of text on your artwork that doesn't really relate to what your release is about, stores can sometimes reject the whole product because it could be misleading to people. So you don't want to do that and sort of delay your release, push it back by a couple of weeks whilst you go and sort out artwork. It's just some things to think about. Important bit. So how much does it cost? So like I said, it's a one-off fee per release, and that covers you for every store that we work with just now, but we're constantly adding stores to our system. And because you've paid that one-off fee, it'll cover you for any of those stores that we add in the future. So if you release something today through us, and the next best music service comes along on Monday, and you want it out, just give us a call, give us an email. We'll just get it sent out for you at no extra cost. So here's a sort of brief summary of what you would expect to pay. So if you've got a single between 1 and 2 tracks, that's going to cost you £24.95, so it's just a one-off payment. An EP between 3 and 5 tracks is £34.95, and an album between 6 and 20 tracks is around £49.95. And as I said, there's no maintenance fees, no annual fees. You just pay once, and your music could be up until the world ends in theory, earning, and it's not costing you anything extra. Do you keep all your rights? As I said previously, you maintain 100% control. You've got, you make all the decisions pretty much. If you want to leave, you can just leave. You can ask us to remove the music. It'll just come off as soon as possible. And 100%, as I said, 100% of your royalties will just be paid back to you. We don't take any cut whatsoever. With regards to how long this takes to get your music online, iTunes are the quickest. So you could send, in theory, you could send me a release on Monday, and it will be live on iTunes on the Tuesday. Different stores take different times to process. It's something to think about when you're coming to us with a release date. So, like I said, Spotify, Google Audio's between 3 and 5 days, and everywhere else is within a 5 to 10 day bracket. So, for that reason, I would recommend a 2-week lead-in time. We'll probably talk about lead-in times and stuff like that afterwards, but at least in the digital sense, give yourself 2 weeks from the point of contacting your distributor to it coming out. We can obviously, if you're cut for time, just get in touch with us and we'll do what we can. But certainly, if you want the release to go live across as many stores as possible on your release date, 2 weeks is generally a good sort of a good time to leave.
Great, thanks very much, Tony. Hopefully that was useful for everyone. It's certainly very important that when you're going to be putting your music out, that you try and get it out on all the digital stores, and using these guys is definitely the way to do it. All right, so now we're going to chat a bit more about the general release. So we've looked at digital in a bit of detail there, but obviously physical and releasing physical product is a really important aspect as well as the marketing and the sort of, I suppose, the more technical and boring sides of things. So Halina has very kindly joined us for another Off the Record. Do you want to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are?
I'm Halina. I work at the venue in Glasgow called Block. We've got an independent record label called Block Music. I'm a blogger. I started a blog called Podcart back in 2009, and I am part of a female collective called TYCI through in Glasgow. And more recently, I've started blogging for The Scotsman as well.
So multiple hats then.
Yeah.
And so you run a label.
I started with Block Music just to try and develop the label more.
Sure, cool. So you've had a fair bit of experience of running an independent label in Scotland.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us just a very basic overview of what a label does and what kind of things you were doing when you were working with artists to put releases out?
Yeah, so I think from an independent viewpoint of a label, we actually probably do more than a major label does. So we kind of get your release together. Well, we have a meeting initially. We decide what formats you want to release, whether it be an EP or a single. Well, some people do singles, but an EP or an album. We make sure that that you have everything, artwork, your photo shoot, your biographies, and we kind of just orchestrate it all. We then make sure that you've got your mixes, your mastering done, which we'll probably talk about more in depth as this goes on. And then we organise PR, so your press. I suppose we've got a kind of duty of care to make sure that the budget that you have is spent wisely, i.e. that you don't spend all your money on either mastering and recording or a video, and you actually leave some money for press, because it's so important. Also, we organise your formats, your releasing, we get that all organised, and we then just kind of monitor everything. I suppose we micromanage to a certain degree as well.
And so are you overseeing the kind of manufacturing side of things as well, then, in terms of getting CDs and vinyl pressed up? Yeah,
even down to kind of posting out releases as well. So it's absolutely everything. And digital, all the digital side of stuff as well, that's important.
And what does the term getting signed mean these days? Because, I mean, do you think that the term getting signed or unsigned is a fair representation of where things are at now?
No, I don't think unsigned. I don't use the term anymore. I used it about 6 years ago when I started blogging, but I don't use it anymore. Because there's so many people self-releasing now. The internet obviously changed quite a lot of things. You can tap into your own audiences, but it's pretty hard. I'm going to be honest. It's like...
Well, that's it, because I mean, I certainly, 10 years ago when I was in a band, everyone was trying to get a record deal. And it doesn't really feel like it's that way anymore, but back then, to us, getting signed meant that a big company, probably a major label or a big independent record label, would come along, you would sign on the dotted line, they would own everything that you do, and they would give you a big chunk of money, or maybe not such a big chunk of money, which was called an advance. And those deals are definitely still out there, and there's a lot of bands, in fact, 6 Scottish bands this year have signed to major labels. Locally, Model Aeroplane signed to Island Records. So it's still there. But just to give you a bit of an idea of how that system works, if you sign to a big label, as I say, they then own the copyright to your recordings, and they are allowed to exploit them in any way they want, or as per your contract. And in return for that right, they will give you what's called an advance. So that might be £10,000, it might be £100,000, it might be £1 million. I suppose it depends how big they think you're going to be and how good your lawyer is at negotiating. But generally, these days, the advance that you're given incorporates the recording costs. So if you're given £50,000, you still have to spend some of that money to go and make the album. And that might be £10,000, it might be £20,000, it might be all the advance spent recording the album. So it's just something to keep in mind if you are ever in the position where you're offered a major record contract. First, definitely get a lawyer to take a look at it. Do not sign it without it. And just keep in mind that you probably are expected to, to spend the money to make the record, as well as to live and buy limousines and that kind of thing. For an independent label like yourselves, and I should say I also, as well as being a manager, I own a small independent record label, which is called The Modern Way as well. We put out the Father Son album and the most recent Stanley Odd album. How does it work with an independent record label in comparison to a major? What's the deal like?
Okay, well, what you'll find generally is that when it says independent label, there'll be a lot of the bands will either be self-funding their own release and just having it under a banner and getting the advice and guidance of releasing. With Block Music, we are so fortunate that because we've got a venue that we earn money through, we have a pot of cash from the venue that's to the side, and we use that for releasing. So each band gets whatever amount they want. Obviously, again, we are very, we stress with each band that not to put themselves too much in debt, because it's just completely pointless. You want to kind of develop as much as you can and earn as much, I suppose, from the release. So, say for example, we give a band £1,500, and they use that for releasing their manufacturing costs, recording, PR, whatever. Then that's absolutely fine. We then actually give them the opportunity to play 3 shows or more within our venue. They get £120 per show, and that takes a big chunk off the amount that they owe us. And then they generally pay back with digital sales, physical sales, touring, which is a massive thing, because we've had some bands that have made £700 from 2 shows, and it's taken a massive chunk off the budget. And
then once they've paid I suppose it's like an advance, isn't it? So once they've paid that £1,500 back, how does it work after that point?
After that, they keep absolutely everything. We keep no copyright. We have no dibs on their recording. They keep everything that they own. And that is something that I always stress with us as a label. And
that's definitely a really fair deal.
Yeah.
In general terms, with independent record companies, they'll do what's called a license. So that will be where the band pays money to go and make the album. So you'll pay the recording, you'll pay for the recording, you'll pay for the mastering, and then you'll license that to the independent record label. So they then own they control the copyright of that recording for a certain amount of time, maybe 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, depending on how the contract looks. They'll pay out money for the manufacturer, for the PR, and maybe a bit of what's called tour support, where they give you a bit of money to help you go out on tour. And then those costs are what's called recouped, so they're made back through the sales, and then after that's happened, they go 50-50 between the artist and the label. And that's generally what an independent record deal would look like. Obviously, with Block, there's a venue involved as well, and the deal's it's pretty reasonable. What's involved in putting something out in a physical format? So if you want to release CDs or vinyl, what sort of things should people be thinking about?
So obviously, your mastering of your tracks has to be obviously a reasonable quality. I have to, before that though, it's timescales. You have to be really mindful about if you are, there's generally a timeline about when you want to release. People tend not to release kind of Christmas, New Year, January. They kind of leave out the summer months as well because of festivals and things, and you kind of get lost in what's happening. But you will find spring, autumn is completely saturated, and Toni will probably be very busy now at the moment. So you have to think how far in advance you have to get everything ready. So for manufacturing and things, we're quite lucky in that the CD manufacturers we work with, we've been with them for every release, so they're kind of really reliable. But I can have anything within 2 weeks if I put everything through to them. Vinyl is a whole different story. Record Store Day has kind of changed things quite a bit. Record Store Day has become quite a massive marketing tool in that a lot of people kind of release limited edition vinyls. But generally a lot of people, there's been a vinyl revival. So vinyl can take, I've waited 5 months for a vinyl to come through, and we've actually missed a deadline, which has been really frustrating because of Record Store Day. So I've always kind of made sure that we kind of get everything ready before that. Artwork is a massive thing, and we'll be talking about resolution and things like that. Yeah. Just track listings, sleeve notes, even your credits, the label. We're going to talk about the codings and things like that Toni thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think the thing to keep in mind if you are going to be releasing a physical product, especially, is that you basically want to have everything, absolutely everything. So all the things that Halina mentioned there, the artwork, the booklet designs, the credits, who played on what track, the thank yous. Never forget how long the thank yous take to pull together. It's not something you do at the last minute. It takes weeks because you've got to make sure you don't forget anyone really important. There are loads of different aspects, as well as actually having the final mixed and mastered music. So mastering, for anyone that doesn't know, is the stage that comes after a track's been mixed, where they kind of it gels the mix together and brings it up to an appropriate volume that can be, that's acceptable on radio and that kind of thing. So it's a bit of a dark art, and you can tell that I'm sort of like fluffing my way through explaining what mastering is, but you have to do it if you're going to be putting something out. So you want to be at the point where you've got all of those things done and dusted, ready to send on, and then start your timeline from that point. Don't start your timeline from when you think all those things will happen, because I can pretty much guarantee it won't happen at the timescale that you're thinking. So for an album, the absolute minimum that we would allow would be like 4 months. From having all that stuff, it would be 4 months between sending it all off to then the release coming back, because you want to allow for, as Halina mentioned, vinyl taking a little longer than you thought. Or with vinyl as well, what happens is you do what's called a test pressing. So the pressing plant will press a couple of copies of it, send it to you, you listen to it, make sure there aren't any wee pops or blips and bits of crackle and that kind of thing.
Just even if you budget in like 4 months, like I always try and give myself, this isn't from like any new band's perspective, it's like putting out my own music and managing bands and stuff, but it always takes way longer than you even budget for. So like if you're talking about 4 months, I try and just give myself almost too much time, because especially if you're working with an indie, if you're a manager, you're certainly managing not only the band, but you're managing the team of people that you're working with, like the PR company, and you're onto the mastering guy and the guy that's printing your vinyls. And I guess it's just giving yourself time to bring all that together. And if one guy falls short of what you thought was going to happen, like might push your release back. It's not something you can really allow.
Definitely,
for.
and we'll touch on the promotion side of things in the next panel. But you need to allow yourself bags of time to actually get it out and put yourself in a position where people can write about you or can play you on the radio. If you don't give yourself enough time, they're just like, oh, well, I would have loved to have written about this, but our deadline was last week, and we just can't do anything now, and we can't write about it after it's out because there's no point. So I've seen loads of bands closing loads of doors for themselves by not allowing enough time. So it's pretty much the number one thing, is just give yourself bags of time and make sure that everything's in place. In terms of cost, just to give the audience an idea of how much it actually costs to put out physical product, do you have a rough idea of how much it would cost to, say, press up 500 regular CD albums?
Well, I've actually reduced the number quite drastically.
Okay.
I've reduced to about 200.
That's actually probably a better starting point than the cost. How many should people press?
So 200 with a full colour sleeve, kind of double-sided, whatever. I've just kind of actually just ordered yesterday, and it came to about £276, which was, I think that's excluding VAT. So it comes in runs. You can't just order a certain, like 76 or whatever. You've got to kind of do them in batches. And the more you order, the less money that you end up paying. But at the same time, you don't want to be left with a massive amount of stock that you're not going to shift. So that is something. So you're far better kind of selling out and then doing another batch as opposed to ordering about 500 and not shifting them. Vinyl. So for, I think, 250, I think, was the last batch, and that came to about £800. Again, probably excluding VAT. What I must stress with that, though, is shop around. Make sure that you, if you are going to go down that road, it's a very expensive route, but make sure that you can, word of mouth, people you've spoke to, even approach bands. People won't mind giving you as much kind of advice as possible. The other alternative is do them yourself. I'm working with an artist just now, and she has pretty much printed, designed, and done everything herself on a minimum budget. And she's kind of done really well. And it's actually been, for some people, it's been more appealing because it's got that kind of human touch to it. That is the other thing. I
think it's a really good point, because more and more, ultimately, physical product is something that is important to sell at gigs. So if you've got something really nice at the merch stand that people want to go and check it out and want to buy it, then that you're kind of, you're going to be winning there. So I would recommend that if you're up for it, and if you don't mind getting a bit of a production line over a weekend with the rest of your band and actually building your own physical product, so pressing the seed, burning them off your computer, building the packaging and handwriting it or stamping it or however you want to do it, it's a much more attractive thing for someone to go and buy than like a plastic CD with a shrink wrap and all that kind of thing. But if you do want to go down that route, it usually works out for up to 1,000 CDs. It's usually about 70p to £1 per copy if you're going for something that's got like a 12-page booklet and printed on CD. And then for vinyl, as Halina mentioned, you're looking at around £3.50 to £4 per unit. So it can be pretty expensive, and I think that the advice of probably pressing a bit less than you think that you hope to sell is good advice, because the last thing anyone wants is a box of 500 CDs under your bed of your own music that you have to go and take to the tip. It's a really dark day. I've done it myself. So maybe press 200 and see how you go. And then if you end up selling out, then absolutely amazing. You can announce, we've sold out of that last run of CDs, but we're getting some more pressed. Okay, so artwork we spoke about, and Toni, you can come in here as well. What sort of things should people be considering when they're designing their sleeve artwork?
The artwork, you want the artwork to stand out, but you also want it to be really clear who it is and what it is. So the two most prominent bits of text on it should definitely just be your band name and the release title. With regards to actually whatever the design is, just make sure it's as high quality as you could possibly make it, because nobody likes blurry artwork. It looks shoddy.
Yeah, and the thing is with artwork is that you can always downsize it, but you can't upsize it. And so if you might only be doing a CD release, But if it sells really well and people demand it, you might end up wanting to do a vinyl at a later date. This is something I did with one of my acts. We only put out a CD, and then a year later, there was a load of demand. They got nominated for the Scottish Album of the Year, and we said, do you know what, let's do 500 vinyl as well. And we'd created the artwork at the size of vinyl and shrunk it down for CD, which meant that when we came to do the vinyl, we could just use the original artwork. Had we not done that, we would have had to go back to the designer and get them to basically redesign it all so that it would be at the appropriate size for vinyl. So that's definitely something to note down, is just dig out the dimensions of vinyl, a 12-inch vinyl cover, and make sure that you create your artwork at that size so that it can be downsized to a CD and then downsized further for digital. Another point that's something that it makes so much sense for your band name and the release title to be in the top of the sleeve somewhere, because if it gets put in a rack, if people are flicking through, then the band name and the release title are at the top. Whereas if it was down at the bottom, or if it's not on there at all, then people don't even know what it is. If for whatever reason, if it's like an artistic thing that you don't want to have anything spoiling the image that's on the cover, then I would suggest that you shrink wrap it and then you put a sticker on the top corner that's got the band name, it's got the release title, so that, you know, in a shop people can flick through, they can pick it out, and then when they take it home, they take the band name off, and the artwork is unscathed the way that you wanted it. Anything else to add in terms of artwork?
Think about if you've got friends that are really artistic and you really like their designs. We actually used a Dundee artist called Laser Skeleton for one of our releases. I have to say that it's the best artwork that I've, seen so far, and they are not completely established. They're just really local artists. So it's been fantastic. Anything
that people should completely avoid with artwork? Tony, you've probably seen some howlers.
I don't. It's like a personal gripe. I hate when it's a photo of the band. Right. It's just dead lazy. No, I mean there's obvious things, like if you want to release like digitally, don't have things like swastikas and stuff on it, because like you can't put it out in Germany. Like it's like actually against the law.
Probably can't really put it out.
Yeah, but it's not a good idea to have that anyway. Yeah, I would just avoid that. Is what I'm getting at.
I mean, I think the key thing is that you want to make sure that the artwork that accompanies the release, it speaks for your band. It speaks about the music, so you want to make sure that it represents that. So, if you're a death metal band, you maybe don't want a cute little baby on the front cover, or if you're a folk band, you maybe don't want, I don't know, a bottle of Jack Daniels on your front cover. You probably wouldn't be allowed to have that anyway. But just think about what it represents, and have a look at
something to think about. You need to be careful of what you're doing, and like legal implications of having essentially a product that you're selling that you haven't really cleared properly. So it's just good practice to either avoid that or get permission. I would imagine it'd be quite hard to get permission.
Yeah, well, I think it's another thing that if you've allowed yourself bags of time, then you've got a bit of room for that back and forth. So if you do send it to EMU bands and they say, well, they've got some questions about it, and if it's something you need to change, as long as you've given yourself loads of time, then you won't have any problems. If you're working on a 1 week deadline, or if you're asking Tony to put it on iTunes the next day, then you might be in trouble.
Yeah.
So once someone's had their physical release actually pressed up, how do you go about getting it into shops?
Well, from an independent level, it's just a case of contacting them and going in. It's as simple as that, really. And they'll obviously give you an idea of costs and, what you're entitled to.
If you have, created some physical product, then at the very least, go to your most local record shop that sells new music and ask if they'll stock it. Because I bet you that they'll say, yep, we'd love to. As long as they're an independent shop and they're allowed to do what they want, they'll probably say, yeah, let's try 2 or 3 copies and see how it goes. And if you create a bit of dialogue and you build a bit of a relationship with them, you can actually create something really good. Because again, like we were talking about in the gigging panel, it's the kind of thing that not that many people actually do. They might send off an email and not hear anything back, but if they go into the shop and say, introduce what it is, tell them when it's coming out, again, giving it a bit of lead time, they'll likely stock it. They might even ask if you want to do an in-store, so you can go in and promote it on the day of release, or you could ask them, can we come in and do an in-store? And then if you're going to be going on tour, if you're going to be playing in other cities, a few months ahead of those shows, there's no harm in calling up all the local record shops and asking if they'll stock a few copies. In Dundee, there's Groucho's across the road, which mostly sells second-hand records, but actually there's a brand new record shop opened up in Broughty Ferry. Don't know if anyone's been yet. It's probably the most terrifying thing for my bank account ever, because they've got so much amazing brand new vinyl. It's a vinyl-only shop, I think, but they seem to be pretty open to working with local acts as well. So if you're going to be bringing out vinyl or even CD, I would pop in and see them in the ferry. And again, there's no harm in popping in and speaking to Grouchos, because if you've got a bit of a buzz and if you're going to be doing a launch show and you're going to be selling gigs at CDs, I'm sure that they'll want to take at least a couple of copies and see how it goes. If you are doing pretty well and you get to a point where you've got some fans across the country, you might want to think about actually bringing in a distributor. I don't know if it might be worth me speaking about that as well as like Toni, there's digital distribution. You can also get physical distribution. Now, you really do need to be at a point where you're selling enough for it to be worth their while. But what they'll do is they basically have a network where they'll sell into shops all across the country and into Europe and that kind of thing. So if you want to get your stuff in FOP and HMV, you probably need to have a distributor. But that said, if you're selling hundreds of copies in your local town and there's a FOP there, there's no harm in going in, popping in and asking them if they'll stock it. So once someone's got it into the shop, roughly how much do you make back from that? How does that work?
Well, vinyls, generally we sell about £10 per copy, and it's about £6 that we'll charge per CD.
Because certainly the experience that we've had is that if we're selling a CD in like an indie record shop, say Love Music, they'll sell it at the retail price of £10 and we'll see somewhere around £5.50, £6 back from that, and they'll take £4. If you're only spending £1 to make it and you get another £5 on top of it, your markup's pretty reasonable. So that's just an idea of how that side of things works. But as Halina says, selling CDs at shows is an absolute must, and it'll put petrol in your tank and it'll get you to the next town, so don't discount that. And the other thing I wanted to add was that it's really worth setting up an online store so that you can sell merch on your website and just post them out to people, because we're seeing that a lot at gigs as well, especially if you're playing like student nights or club nights, that people really want to buy a vinyl but they don't want to then like cart a 12-inch vinyl on a night out with them, because it's definitely going to get wrecked or left somewhere.
And t-shirts, as your merch is really important. T-shirts, tote bags, things like that, especially I've seen such an increase in that happening and such a demand for it now, especially if your artwork's really good. Then we've actually had pre-orders without even stating that we've got merch coming out for stuff that we've kind of put the artwork online for. So that's another thing worth kind of remembering.
Definitely. So there's a couple of services to mention that you might want to check out. There's one called Music Glue, which you can also sell gig tickets through, so it's quite handy. If you're going to do like an album launch or something, you might want to sell your CD and bundle it up with a ticket. That's something you can do in Music Glue. There's a service called Big Cartel, which is really good, and it just links up with your PayPal. I think it's free, up to like 5 products on the store. So those are just a couple. There's plenty out there, so I won't name them all, but if you are looking to sell stuff online, I would definitely recommend it, and those are a couple of good ones to do it.